Hi, I'm Rebecca. Today I'm sharing the story of how my sister's cruel treatment of my daughter during a family visit led to the most devastating confrontation of our lives. This is titled, My Sister Made My 8-Year-Old Sleep on the Floor, Then I Showed My Child Protective Services Badge. When I arrived to pick up my daughter from what was supposed to be a fun weekend at Aunt Victoria's house, I discovered my child sleeping on bare hardwood with a thin towel as her only covering while my sister's children enjoyed luxury bedrooms upstairs. But my sister had no idea that my professional expertise in child welfare would become the weapon that would expose 15 years of family favoritism and protect not just my daughter but potentially save other children from the toxic environment she had created. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Rebecca Martinez, and until 3 months ago, I believed that family loyalty meant accepting unequal treatment in order to maintain peace. I am 34 years old, a licensed child protective services investigator for the state of Oregon, and the mother of 8-year-old Emma, the brightest light in my world. For 15 years, I had watched my younger sister Victoria receive preferential treatment from our parents while I was expected to be understanding, supportive, and grateful for whatever attention remained after Victoria's needs were satisfied. Our family dynamic had been established long before Victoria and I understood its implications. Victoria, now 29, had been born with a congenital heart condition that required multiple surgeries during her first 5 years of life. Our parents, Michael and Sandra Rodriguez, had naturally focused their attention and resources on ensuring Victoria's survival and health. During those critical years, I learned to be the responsible older sister who did not require additional attention or create additional stress for our overwhelmed parents. The pattern that emerged during Victoria's medical crisis never changed. Even after her complete recovery by age 7, I became the family member who was expected to understand when plans changed to accommodate Victoria's preferences, who should be grateful for whatever financial support remained after Victoria's needs were met, and who must never express resentment about the disparate treatment we received throughout our childhood and into our adult lives. During high school, when I maintained a 2 GPA while working part-time to save money for college, our parents spent my potential college fund on a brand new car for Victoria's 16th birthday. When I expressed disappointment about the impact this decision would have on my educational plans, I was reminded that Victoria had suffered enough during her early childhood and deserved to enjoy her teenage years without financial stress. I secured academic scholarships and student loans to attend Portland State University, where I studied social work with a concentration in child welfare. My career choice was influenced partly by my desire to protect children who lacked advocates within their own family. Victoria, meanwhile, received full financial support for her education at a private liberal arts college in California, where she studied art history and graduated without debt or employment pressure. After completing my master's degree in social work and obtaining my license as a child protective services investigator, I had established a stable career that provided both financial security and professional fulfillment. My work involved investigating reports of child abuse and neglect, conducting family assessments, and developing safety plans that protected vulnerable children while supporting family preservation when possible. The skills I developed in my professional role included the ability to recognize signs of emotional and physical neglect, identify family dynamics that posed risks to child welfare, and assess living environments for safety and adequacy. I had conducted hundreds of home visits, interviewed thousands of children and caregivers, and developed expertise in distinguishing between temporary family challenges and systemic patterns of inadequate care. My personal life had followed a different trajectory than Victoria's carefully supported path. I married my college boyfriend, David Martinez, immediately after graduation, and we welcomed Emma when I was 26 years old. David and I divorced when Emma was 4 years old, not due to dramatic conflict, but because we had grown into different people with incompatible long-term goals. We maintained an amicable co-parenting relationship that prioritized Emma's stability and emotional security. Emma had become the center of my world in ways that I had never experienced with any other relationship. She possessed curiosity, intelligence, and empathy that amazed me daily. She excelled academically, participated enthusiastically in soccer and piano lessons, and demonstrated kindness toward other children that made me proud of the values we were instilling together. My greatest professional motivation was ensuring that other children received the protection and advocacy that would enable them to thrive as Emma was thriving. Victoria's adult life had unfolded according to the same pattern of support and accommodation that had characterized her childhood. After college, our parents provided the down payment for her house in an upscale suburb of Sacramento. When she married her husband, James Chen, our parents paid for a wedding that cost more than my annual salary. When Victoria and James had their first child, our parents relocated to Sacramento to provide daily child care support while Victoria pursued her interest in interior design. Victoria and James now had 3 children: 7-year-old Sophia, 5-year-old Marcus, and 3-year-old Isabella. Victoria had built a successful interior design business with our parents' financial backing and child care support. Their house, a 4-bedroom colonial in an exclusive neighborhood, showcased Victoria's design expertise with custom furniture, professional artwork, and luxury finishes throughout. The contrast between Victoria's circumstances and my own had never bothered me as much as the assumption that I should be grateful for whatever attention or support my family provided. When our parents visited Portland twice per year, they stayed with me for convenience, but spent most of their time planning activities around Victoria's schedule when she visited simultaneously. When our parents provided Christmas gifts, Victoria's children received elaborate presents while Emma received modest gifts with explanations about budget constraints. I had accepted these patterns because I believed that maintaining family relationships required tolerance for imperfect fairness. My professional training had taught me that family preservation often required accepting less than ideal circumstances in order to maintain connections that provided stability and support over time. Emma had noticed the differential treatment but had never expressed resentment or confusion about the family dynamics. She enjoyed her cousin's company during family gatherings and seemed to accept that Aunt Victoria's family lived differently than we did. I had been careful never to criticize Victoria or our parents in Emma's presence, believing that children should not be burdened with adult conflicts or resentments. The incident that would fundamentally alter our family relationships began with what seemed like a generous offer from Victoria. In early October, she called to invite Emma for a long weekend visit during a school holiday. Victoria explained that Sophia had been asking to spend more time with her older cousin, and she thought the girls would enjoy having a special weekend together while the adults handled some family business. "Rebecca," Victoria said during our phone conversation, "the girls are finally old enough to really enjoy each other's company. Sophia looks up to Emma so much, and I think it would be wonderful for them to have some cousin time without all the adults hovering over them." The invitation seemed like an opportunity for Emma to develop a closer relationship with her cousin, while giving me a rare weekend to focus on personal activities without parenting responsibility. Victoria had never previously offered to host Emma individually, and I interpreted the invitation as a positive development in our family relationships. I agreed to drive Emma to Sacramento on Friday afternoon and pick her up on Sunday evening. Emma was excited about the prospect of spending time with her cousins and sleeping in Sophia's bedroom, which Victoria had described as a princess suite with twin beds, custom furniture, and decorative elements that reflected Sophia's interests in unicorns and rainbows. During the week leading up to the visit, Emma talked enthusiastically about activities she might do with Sophia and Marcus. She packed her favorite pajamas, books, and small toys that she wanted to share with her cousin. I encouraged her excitement while emphasizing the importance of following Aunt Victoria's household rules and being respectful of their family routine. Friday morning, I took Emma to school as usual before driving to my office to complete case documentation and prepare for the following week's court hearing. My work that day included reviewing files for 3 ongoing investigations, conducting phone interviews with service providers involved in family safety plans, and completing reports that would inform judicial decisions about child custody and visitation arrangements. The irony of spending my day protecting other people's children while preparing to entrust my own daughter to family members who had never demonstrated particular interest in her welfare was not lost on me. However, I assumed that Victoria's invitation indicated genuine desire to develop relationships with Emma and that family connections provided inherent safety that did not exist in the cases I investigated professionally. I picked Emma up from school at 3 o'clock and we drove the 2 hours to Sacramento, arriving at Victoria's house just as James was returning from his position as a software engineer for a major technology company. The house looked impeccable as always, with professional landscaping, luxury vehicles in the driveway, and exterior details that reflected Victoria's design expertise and financial resources. Victoria greeted us at the front door with enthusiasm that seemed genuine. She hugged Emma warmly and commented on how much she had grown since their last visit during the summer family reunion. Sophia, Marcus, and Isabella ran to the door to welcome their cousin, and the children immediately began discussing plans for the weekend activities Victoria had organized. The house's interior continued to demonstrate Victoria's successful design business and comfortable financial circumstances. The living areas featured custom furniture, original artwork, and decorative elements that created an atmosphere of luxury and sophistication. The children's play areas included educational toys, gaming systems, and craft supplies that reflected thoughtful investment in enriching activities. Victoria gave Emma a tour of the house, showing her the various rooms and explaining the weekend schedule she had planned. The children would have a movie night on Friday, visit a local children's museum on Saturday, and enjoy a special brunch on Sunday before my arrival to pick up Emma. Victoria had clearly invested time and effort in planning activities that would be enjoyable and age-appropriate for all 4 children. I felt confident about leaving Emma in this environment. Victoria appeared genuinely interested in providing a positive experience for her niece. The house was clearly safe and well-maintained, and the planned activities seemed thoughtful and engaging. I kissed Emma goodbye, reminded her to call if she needed anything, and drove back to Portland with anticipation for a relaxing weekend of adult activities. Saturday passed quietly for me. I attended a yoga class, caught up on household tasks that were difficult to complete with Emma present, and enjoyed dinner with friends without worrying about bedtime schedules or children's meal preferences. Emma called Saturday evening to report that they had enjoyed the Children's Museum and were looking forward to the movie night Victoria had planned. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Sunday morning, I prepared for the drive back to Sacramento, assuming that I would find Emma happy and tired from her weekend adventure. I had purchased small gifts for Victoria's children as a gesture of gratitude for hosting Emma, and I was looking forward to hearing about the activities they had enjoyed together. The discovery that would shatter my assumptions about family loyalty and forever change my relationship with Victoria was waiting for me in the basement of her perfectly appointed house. Emma had been sleeping on bare hardwood floors with a thin bathroom towel as her only covering while Victoria's children enjoyed comfortable bedrooms upstairs. But Victoria had no idea that my professional training had taught me to recognize the signs of deliberate child neglect and that my legal authority as a child protective services investigator would provide me with options that most parents did not possess when confronting family members who endangered their children. Sunday afternoon arrived with clear skies and the promise of what I expected would be a pleasant reunion with Emma after her first solo weekend visit with Victoria's family. I had packed the small gifts I had purchased for Victoria's children and prepared for the 2-hour drive to Sacramento with genuine appreciation for the opportunity Victoria had provided for cousin bonding. During the drive, I reflected on how this weekend might represent a positive shift in our family dynamics, with Victoria finally expressing interest in developing meaningful relationships with Emma beyond formal holiday gatherings. I arrived at Victoria's house at approximately 4 o'clock, parking behind James's luxury SUV in their circular driveway. The exterior presentation remained as immaculate as always, with professional landscaping that included seasonal flower arrangements and decorative elements that showcased Victoria's design expertise. The house projected an image of domestic success and child-friendly comfort that aligned with my expectations for the weekend experience Emma had enjoyed. Victoria answered the front door with a smile that seemed genuine but carried an undertone of tension that I had not noticed during previous family interactions. She appeared well-dressed and composed, maintaining the polished appearance that characterized her public presentation, but something in her demeanor suggested underlying stress or discomfort about my arrival. "Rebecca, perfect timing," Victoria said, stepping aside to allow me entry into the foyer. "The children just finished their afternoon snack, and Emma has been excited about seeing you all day. She had such a wonderful time with Sophia and Marcus." I entered the house and immediately noticed the contrast between the pristine condition of the common areas and the absence of typical evidence that children had been actively playing throughout the weekend. The living room furniture remained perfectly arranged, decorative elements showed no signs of displacement, and the overall environment suggested either extraordinary cleanliness maintenance or limited child activity in the main living spaces. "Where are the children now?" I asked, expecting to hear Emma's voice or the sounds of cousin play that had characterized previous family gatherings. The house felt unusually quiet for a residence that had been hosting 4 children throughout the weekend. Victoria gestured toward the staircase leading to the upper floor. "Sophia and Marcus are in their rooms having quiet time, and Isabella is napping. Emma is, well, she's been playing in the basement family room. That's where she's been most comfortable during her visit." The explanation struck me as unusual because Victoria had never previously mentioned a basement family room, and during my tour of the house on Friday evening, she had shown me only the upper floor bedrooms and main level common area. Additionally, the reference to Emma being most comfortable in the basement suggested a level of familiarity with the space that seemed inconsistent with her first overnight visit to the house. "I'll go collect her things and say goodbye to the other children," I said, moving toward the staircase to retrieve Emma from whatever play area Victoria had established in the basement. Victoria's response carried an edge of nervousness that I had not detected in our previous interaction. "Actually, why don't I bring Emma up here? Her things are already gathered, and I think the other children need their quiet time right now." This suggestion felt odd because Victoria had always encouraged family interaction during previous visits, and Emma typically enjoyed saying goodbye to her cousins after spending time together. The insistence on separating the children seemed contrary to Victoria's usual approach to family gatherings and suggested potential complications that had not been disclosed. "I'd like to see where Emma has been playing," I said firmly, using the professional tone that had proven effective in situations where caregivers attempted to control my access to children or living environment. "And I want to thank Sophia and Marcus personally for including Emma in their weekend activities." Victoria's discomfort became more apparent as she realized that I intended to explore the basement space rather than accepting her alternative suggestion. Her body language shifted to reflect defensive positioning, and her facial expression indicated stress that went beyond normal end-of-visit logistics. "The basement is a bit messy right now," Victoria said, attempting to redirect my attention toward the main floor area. "The children have been playing down there all weekend, and I haven't had a chance to organize everything yet." This explanation contradicted her earlier description of the immaculate condition of the main living areas, and suggested that the basement had been the primary location for child activities throughout the weekend. My professional experience had taught me that caregivers who attempted to restrict access to specific areas of their homes during child welfare assessments often had reasons for concealing conditions that did not meet acceptable standards. I moved toward the basement entrance, which was located adjacent to the kitchen area, without waiting for further permission or explanation from Victoria. My training had emphasized the importance of observing actual living conditions rather than accepting verbal descriptions from caregivers who might have motivations for misrepresenting circumstance. The basement staircase was narrow and poorly lit, with minimal safety features that would be concerning for young children navigating the space without adult supervision. As I descended, I could smell mustiness and dampness that suggested inadequate climate control and potentially problematic environmental conditions for extended child occupancy. The basement space opened into an unfinished area with concrete floors, exposed ceiling beams, and minimal furniture that consisted primarily of outdated recreational equipment and storage boxes. The environment was cold, damp, and uninviting, presenting stark contrast to the luxury appointments and comfortable atmosphere that characterized the upper levels of Victoria's house. In the corner of this basement space, I discovered Emma sitting on bare concrete floor, wrapped in what appeared to be a thin bathroom towel. She was attempting to organize a small collection of her personal belongings that had been placed in a cardboard box rather than the proper luggage I had packed for her weekend visit. The sight of my daughter in these conditions triggered immediate professional assessment of the environment and circumstances that had led to this arrangement. The basement space lacked adequate heating, proper bedding, sufficient lighting, and basic comfort features that would be appropriate for child occupancy. The concrete floor was cold and hard, the towel provided inadequate covering for sleeping purposes, and the overall environment suggested deliberate relegation to substandard accommodation. "Emma, sweetheart," I said, maintaining calm tone while internally processing the implications of what I was observing. "How are you doing? Are you ready to go home?" Emma looked up with expression that combined relief at seeing me with resignation that suggested she had accepted these conditions as normal for her visit. Her response would provide crucial information about how she had interpreted the treatment she had received, and whether she understood that these arrangements were inappropriate. "Hi, Mommy," Emma said quietly. "I'm ready to go home now. I've been staying down here because Aunt Victoria said there wasn't enough room upstairs for me to sleep with Sophia." This explanation confirmed that Emma had been deliberately housed in inadequate conditions, while Victoria's children enjoyed comfortable bedrooms upstairs. The reasoning provided to Emma suggested that space limitations required these arrangements, which contradicted the reality of Victoria's four-bedroom house and the guest accommodations that would be expected in a residence of this size and quality. I knelt beside Emma and began assessing her physical condition and emotional state using techniques I employed during professional child welfare investigation. She appeared physically unharmed but showed signs of fatigue and stress that could result from sleeping on concrete floors without adequate bedding or climate control. "Tell me about your weekend, sweetheart," I said, encouraging Emma to share her experiences while I continued observing the basement environment for additional evidence of inappropriate conditions or treatment. Emma's account revealed a pattern of exclusion and differential treatment that had characterized her entire weekend visit. She had been provided meals separately from Victoria's children, excluded from family activities that required upper floor access, and expected to entertain herself in the basement space while her cousins enjoyed structured activities and proper accommodations upstairs. "Sophia and Marcus got to go to the Children's Museum, but Aunt Victoria said I needed to stay here and rest," Emma explained, "and they had movie night in Sophia's room, but there wasn't space for me up there." These details confirmed that Emma had been systematically excluded from the activities Victoria had described during our phone conversations, and deliberately isolated in substandard conditions, while receiving substantially different treatment than Victoria's own children. The pattern constituted clear evidence of discriminatory treatment based solely on Emma's status as a visiting family member rather than Victoria's biological child. My professional training enabled me to recognize that these conditions and treatment patterns met legal definitions of child neglect and emotional abuse. The deliberate provision of inadequate shelter, systematic exclusion from family activities, and creation of differential treatment based on family status represented violations of basic child welfare standards that I investigated regularly in my professional capacity. As I helped Emma gather her belongings, I noticed additional evidence of the inadequate arrangements Victoria had made for her niece's visit. Emma's clothing appeared to have been worn throughout the weekend without access to laundry facilities. Her personal hygiene items had not been used, and her emotional state suggested prolonged stress and confusion about her treatment during the visit. Victoria appeared at the top of the basement stairs as I was completing my assessment of Emma's condition and the environmental circumstance. Her expression reflected awareness that I had discovered the true nature of Emma's weekend experience and concern about my potential response to these revelations. "Rebecca, I can explain," Victoria said, her voice carrying defensive tone that I recognized from caregivers who had been confronted with evidence of inappropriate child treatment. "The house has been so busy this weekend, and I thought Emma would enjoy having her own special space down there." This explanation constituted a clear attempt to reframe deliberate neglect as thoughtful accommodation, employing justifications that my professional experience had taught me to recognize as indicators of deeper problems with caregiver judgment and priority. The characterization of cold, damp basement space as special demonstrated fundamental disconnection from basic child welfare standards and appropriate treatment expectations. I guided Emma toward the basement stairs while maintaining professional composure that concealed the anger and determination building within me as I processed the full implications of what my daughter had experienced during her weekend visit. My training had prepared me to handle situations where family members endangered children, but I had never expected to apply these skills to protect Emma from her own. Victoria, we need to have a serious conversation about Emma's treatment during this visit, I said, using the authoritative tone that established my professional expertise and legal authority in matters involving child welfare. The conditions you provided for my daughter are completely unacceptable and constitute violations of basic child care standards. Victoria's response revealed her assumption that family relationships would protect her from accountability for her treatment of Emma and her lack of understanding that my professional role provided me with legal authority that superseded family loyalty when child welfare was at stake. "Don't be dramatic, Rebecca," Victoria said dismissively. "Emma was perfectly fine down there. She's just being sensitive because she's not used to staying at other people's houses." This response demonstrated Victoria's inability to recognize the severity of her actions and her expectation that I would prioritize family harmony over Emma's welfare. However, Victoria was unaware that my professional training and legal authority provided me with tools for addressing child endangerment that extended far beyond typical family dispute resolution methods. As we reached the main floor of the house, I began implementing the systematic approach I used when documenting evidence of child neglect and preparing to take protective action on behalf of endangered children. Victoria had created a situation that required professional intervention rather than family negotiation, and my unique qualifications positioned me to provide that intervention in ways that would ensure Emma's protection while holding Victoria accountable for her choices. The revelation of Emma's treatment had transformed my understanding of Victoria's character and motivated me to use every tool at my disposal to ensure that no child would experience such deliberate neglect in Victoria's care again. My sister was about to learn that endangering my daughter meant confronting a Child Protective Services investigator who possessed both personal motivation and professional authority to pursue justice through official channels rather than family discussion. The transition from shocked mother to investigative professional occurred within seconds of reaching Victoria's main floor with Emma at my side. My years of training had taught me to compartmentalize emotional responses when child safety required immediate assessment and documentation. While my heart raged at the deliberate mistreatment my daughter had endured, my mind shifted into the systematic approach I employed when gathering evidence of child endangerment that would support legal intervention. I guided Emma to the living room sofa and knelt beside her, maintaining the calm demeanor that helped children feel secure during stressful interviews. My professional experience had demonstrated that children provide the most accurate information when they feel supported and understand that adults are taking their experiences seriously without becoming overwhelmed by emotional reaction. "Emma, I want you to know that what happened to you this weekend was not okay," I said, using language that validated her experience while avoiding terms that might frighten her about potential consequences. "I need to ask you some questions about your visit, and I want you to tell me exactly what happened, even if someone told you not to talk about it." Emma's response revealed the extent to which Victoria had attempted to normalize inappropriate treatment while discouraging disclosure of the actual condition. This pattern of secrecy and minimization represented classic indicators of deliberate neglect rather than accidental oversight or resource limitations. "Aunt Victoria said I shouldn't complain about staying in the basement because some children don't have any place to sleep," Emma explained. "She said I should be grateful that she let me visit at all because taking care of extra children is really hard work." These statements provided crucial evidence that Victoria had deliberately chosen to house Emma in inadequate conditions, while attempting to manipulate her into accepting mistreatment as appropriate. The psychological manipulation component elevated the situation beyond simple neglect into emotional abuse territory, which carried more serious legal implications and required immediate protective intervention. Victoria observed our conversation from across the room, her expression shifting between defensive anger and growing awareness that her actions were being evaluated through a professional lens, rather than family dispute resolution framework. She had expected typical sisterly conflict that could be managed through discussion and compromise, not systematic documentation of child welfare violations by a licensed investigator. "Rebecca, you're being ridiculous," Victoria interjected, her voice carrying the dismissive tone that had characterized her responses to my concerns throughout our adult relationship. "Emma is fine. She's just being dramatic because she's not used to staying places without you." This attempt to minimize Emma's experience while attacking her credibility represented another classic deflection strategy that I encountered regularly when caregivers attempted to avoid accountability for inappropriate treatment of children. Victoria's response demonstrated her fundamental misunderstanding of both the severity of her actions and my professional obligations when confronted with evidence of child endangerment. I retrieved my phone from my purse and began photographing the basement conditions where Emma had been housed, documenting the concrete floors, inadequate bedding, poor lighting, and environmental factors that constituted substandard accommodation. Each photograph would serve as evidence in the formal complaint I intended to file against Victoria through official Child Protective Services channels. "What are you doing?" Victoria demanded, her defensive posture escalating as she realized that I was treating this situation as a professional investigation rather than a family disagreement. "You can't just come into my house and start taking pictures." My response established the legal authority that my professional position provided in situations involving child welfare concerns, regardless of family relationships or personal considerations that might typically influence conflict resolution approaches. "I am a licensed Child Protective Services investigator documenting evidence of child neglect and emotional abuse," I said, maintaining professional tone while ensuring that Victoria understood the serious legal implications of her choices. "These conditions constitute clear violations of basic child welfare standards, and I have both the authority and the obligation to pursue formal intervention." Victoria's reaction revealed her shock at discovering that family relationships would not protect her from professional accountability and that my career in child welfare provided me with legal tools that superseded typical family loyalty expectations. "You can't investigate your own family," Victoria protested, her voice rising as she grasped the potential consequences of my professional involvement. "That's a conflict of interest. You're supposed to be my sister, not some government worker." This objection demonstrated Victoria's misunderstanding of both professional ethics and legal requirements when child safety concerns arose. While I could not serve as the primary investigator in a case involving my own child, I possessed the authority to document evidence, file formal complaints, and initiate protective services involvement that would ensure independent professional assessment of the situation. I completed photographing the basement conditions and returned to Emma, who was observing the adult conflict with confusion and concern about the escalating tension between her mother and aunt. My professional training emphasized the importance of maintaining child focus during family crisis situations and ensuring that children understood they were not responsible for adult conflicts. "Emma, I want you to sit here and look at one of your books while Aunt Victoria and I finish talking," I said, providing her with appropriate distraction while I continued gathering information that would support formal intervention. "You did nothing wrong this weekend, and everything that happens next is about adults making better choices to keep children safe." This reassurance served multiple purposes in addressing Emma's immediate emotional needs, while establishing clear boundaries about responsibility and consequence that would help her process the weekend experience in healthy ways, rather than internalizing guilt or confusion about family conflict. I turned my attention back to Victoria, who was pacing near the kitchen area and appeared increasingly agitated as she realized the scope of potential consequences for her treatment of Emma. Her defensive reactions suggested awareness that her actions could not be justified through typical explanations about resource limitations or alternative arrangements. "Victoria, I need you to explain your decision-making process for housing Emma in basement conditions while your children enjoyed comfortable bedrooms upstairs. Using interviewing techniques that encourage detailed responses while documenting contradictions or inadequate justifications for inappropriate treatment. Victoria's explanation revealed the depth of her entitlement mentality and fundamental disregard for Emma's welfare that had motivated her deliberate creation of differential treatment during the weekend visit. "This is my house, and I can make whatever arrangements I think are appropriate for guests," Victoria said, her tone reflecting anger at being questioned about decisions she considered within her absolute authority. "Emma is not my responsibility. If you don't like how I handle visits, then don't bring her here again." This response provided damaging evidence of Victoria's attitude toward child welfare responsibilities and her view of Emma as less deserving of basic care standards than her own children. The dismissive language and explicit rejection of responsibility for guest child safety would support formal findings of deliberate neglect rather than accidental oversight. I continued documenting Victoria's statements while mentally preparing the formal complaint that would initiate official Child Protective Services involvement in assessing Victoria's home environment and parenting practice. My professional experience had taught me that caregivers who demonstrated such fundamental disregard for visiting children's welfare often exhibited concerning patterns in their treatment of their own children as well. "Your arrangements subjected Emma to conditions that constitute child neglect under state law," I explained, ensuring that Victoria understood the legal framework that governed her actions regardless of her personal opinions about appropriate treatment. "Housing a child on concrete floors without adequate bedding, excluding her from family activities, and providing differential treatment based solely on family status violates basic child welfare standards." Victoria's response revealed her expectation that family relationships would shield her from legal accountability and her fundamental misunderstanding of professional obligations that superseded personal loyalty when child safety was at stake. "You wouldn't dare file a complaint against your own sister," Victoria challenged, her voice carrying confidence that family bonds would prevent me from pursuing formal intervention despite the clear evidence of inappropriate treatment. "Our parents would never forgive you for causing family problems over something so minor." This assumption demonstrated Victoria's continued reliance on family-enabling patterns that had protected her from consequences throughout our shared history. However, she failed to understand that my professional development had been motivated partly by determination to protect children from adults who prioritized their own convenience over child welfare, regardless of family relationships or social pressure. My response established the clear boundary between personal relationships and professional responsibilities that my career in child welfare had required me to maintain when facing situations that threatened child safety. "My obligation to protect children from neglect and abuse supersedes family loyalty. Emma's welfare is more important than maintaining family peace, and your actions require professional intervention regardless of our relationship." This declaration marked the moment when Victoria realized that her assumptions about family protection were incorrect, and that her treatment of Emma would result in formal consequences rather than private resolution through family negotiation or parental pressure. The conversation that followed revealed the full extent of Victoria's entitlement and her inability to comprehend that her deliberate mistreatment of Emma constituted serious violations of child welfare standards rather than reasonable household management decisions. "I provided Emma with shelter and food," Victoria argued, attempting to minimize her actions by focusing on basic necessities while ignoring the quality and appropriateness of the accommodations she had arranged. "She wasn't harmed. She's just spoiled and can't handle sleeping arrangements that are different from what she's used to at home." This characterization of concrete floors and bathroom towels as acceptable sleeping arrangements demonstrated Victoria's fundamental disconnection from basic child care standards and her willingness to blame Emma for reasonable expectations of appropriate treatment during family visits. I documented Victoria's continued minimization of her actions while preparing to gather Emma's belongings and conclude our visit in preparation for filing formal complaints through official channels. My professional training had taught me that caregivers who demonstrated such profound lack of insight about child welfare responsibilities rarely modified their behavior through discussion alone, and required external intervention to ensure child safety. "Victoria, your actions this weekend have demonstrated that you cannot be trusted to provide appropriate care for visiting children," I said, establishing clear boundaries about future contact while ensuring that she understood the permanence of consequences for her choices. Emma will not be visiting your home again until you complete parenting education and demonstrate understanding of basic child welfare standards. This boundary represented both immediate protection for Emma and potential motivation for Victoria to address her fundamental misunderstanding of appropriate child treatment, if she desired to maintain family relationships that included access to her needs. Victoria's final response revealed her continued expectation that family pressure and manipulation would override professional accountability and restore her access to Emma without requiring acknowledgement of wrongdoing or behavioral change. "Wait until our parents hear about this," Victoria threatened, invoking the family dynamics that had historically protected her from consequences while expecting me to prioritize family harmony over child protection. "They're going to be furious with you for overreacting and causing drama over nothing." This threat confirmed that Victoria remained fundamentally unchanged in her approach to avoiding accountability through family manipulation rather than accepting responsibility for inappropriate action. However, she failed to recognize that my professional development had prepared me to withstand family pressure when child welfare required protective intervention. As I gathered Emma and her belongings to leave Victoria's house, I felt the profound satisfaction that accompanied using professional expertise to protect vulnerable individuals from harm. My career in child welfare had been motivated by determination to advocate for children who lacked effective protection within their family system. The discovery that Emma required similar advocacy had transformed my professional skills into personal mission that would ensure her safety while holding Victoria accountable for her deliberate neglect. The drive home would provide opportunity to help Emma process her weekend experience, while beginning the formal complaint process that would initiate official investigation of Victoria's home environment and parenting practices. My sister was about to learn that endangering children carried serious consequences, regardless of family relationships or historical patterns of enabling behavior. The drive from Sacramento to Portland provided essential processing time for both Emma and me as we began transitioning from crisis response to systematic intervention plan. The 2-hour journey allowed for careful consideration of the formal complaint procedures that would ensure appropriate investigation of Victoria's actions while protecting Emma from additional exposure to inappropriate. My professional training had emphasized the importance of maintaining clear documentation standards and following established protocols when pursuing child welfare investigations, particularly in situations involving personal relationships that could create potential conflicts of interest. The evidence I had gathered during Emma's pickup would require careful presentation through official channels to ensure credible investigation and appropriate accountability measures. I began the documentation process by using my hands-free communication system to record detailed observations about the conditions I had discovered at Victoria's residence. The voice recordings would supplement the photographic evidence and provide comprehensive documentation of environmental factors, caregiving decisions, and Victoria's responses to questioning about her treatment of Emma. "I want you to know that everything that happened this weekend was about adult choices, not anything you did wrong," I explained as we traveled north on interstate. "Sometimes adults make decisions that hurt children, and when that happens, other adults have a responsibility to make sure it doesn't happen again." This conversation served multiple purposes in helping Emma understand the situation within an age-appropriate framework, while beginning the therapeutic process that would support her emotional recovery from the neglectful treatment she had experienced. My professional experience had taught me that children process traumatic experiences more effectively when they receive clear explanations that validate their feelings while establishing adult responsibility for resolution. Emma's questions during our conversation revealed the extent to which Victoria had attempted to normalize inappropriate treatment while discouraging disclosure of the actual condition. These manipulation strategies represented concerning patterns that suggested systematic rather than isolated problems with Victoria's approach to childcare responsibilities. "Was I supposed to tell you about sleeping in the basement?" Emma asked, her voice reflecting confusion about the conflicting messages she had received from Victoria regarding appropriate disclosure of her weekend experience. Aunt Victoria said it would make you worry unnecessarily if I complained about things that weren't really important. This revelation provided crucial evidence that Victoria had deliberately attempted to conceal her mistreatment of Emma through psychological manipulation designed to prevent accurate reporting of neglectful conditions. The pattern of secrecy and victim blaming elevated the situation beyond simple oversight into deliberate emotional abuse that required immediate protective intervention. I assured Emma that she should always feel comfortable sharing her experiences with me, regardless of instructions she might receive from other adults about keeping secrets or avoiding complaints. This conversation established clear communication expectations that would support her emotional security while ensuring that any future concerning situations would be promptly disclosed and addressed. Upon arriving home, I immediately began implementing the formal complaint procedures that would initiate official Child Protective Services investigation of Victoria's home environment and parenting practices. My professional position required careful navigation of potential conflicts of interest while ensuring that Emma received appropriate protection through established child welfare systems. The first step involved contacting my supervisor, Patricia Williams, to report the situation and request assignment of an independent investigator who could provide objective assessment without the complications that would arise from my personal involvement in the case. This approach ensured professional integrity while utilizing official channels to address the documented neglect. Patricia, I need to report a child welfare concern involving my sister's treatment of my daughter during a family visit, I explained during our phone conversation. I have documented evidence of deliberate neglect that requires formal investigation, but my personal relationship creates obvious conflicts that necessitate independent case assignment. Patricia's response reflected the professional protocols that governed situations where Child Protective Services employees encountered child welfare concerns within their personal relationship. The agency maintained clear procedures for handling such situations to ensure appropriate investigation while protecting the integrity of both the legal process and the employees involved. Rebecca, I appreciate you following proper protocols by reporting this situation through official channels, Patricia said. I will assign Senior Investigator Michael Chen to handle this case independently. You will need to provide all documentation and evidence to Michael while maintaining appropriate boundaries about your involvement in the investigation process. This assignment ensured that Victoria's case would receive thorough professional evaluation by an experienced investigator with no personal connections to our family dynamic. Michael Chen possessed extensive experience in complex neglect cases and had established credibility for conducting objective assessments that resulted in appropriate protective intervention. I spent the evening preparing comprehensive documentation that included photographic evidence of basement conditions, detailed written observations about environmental factors and caregiving decisions, transcribed statements from Victoria regarding her rationale for differential treatment, and professional assessment of Emma's emotional and physical condition following her weekend visit. The documentation process required careful attention to professional standards that would ensure credibility during formal investigation and potential legal proceedings. Each piece of evidence needed to meet established criteria for child welfare cases, while maintaining clear separation between my roles as concerned mother and professional investigator. The written report I prepared for Michael Chen included detailed descriptions of the basement environment where Emma had been housed, specific examples of differential treatment between Emma and Victoria's children, documentation of Victoria's attempts to normalize inappropriate conditions and discourage disclosure, and professional assessment of the psychological manipulation strategies Victoria had employed. Environmental conditions assessment. The basement space where the visiting child was housed consisted of unfinished concrete floors, exposed ceiling beams, inadequate climate control, minimal lighting, and absence of appropriate furniture or bedding. The child was provided with a thin bathroom towel as covering and expected to sleep directly on concrete surfaces. Temperature conditions were cold and damp, creating potential health risks for extended occupancy. This clinical documentation style ensured objective presentation of evidence, while avoiding emotional language that might compromise professional credibility during formal investigation procedures. The systematic approach demonstrated adherence to established child welfare assessment protocols that would support appropriate intervention decisions. The report continued with detailed analysis of caregiving decisions that constituted deliberate neglect rather than resource limitations or oversight errors. Victoria's differential treatment of Emma compared to her own children provided clear evidence of discriminatory practices that violated basic child welfare standards. Caregiving analysis. The caregiver made deliberate decisions to provide substandard accommodations for the visiting child while maintaining luxury conditions for her biological children. These choices reflected discriminatory treatment based solely on family status rather than legitimate resource constraints. The caregiver's explanations for these arrangements demonstrated fundamental misunderstanding of appropriate childcare responsibility. My professional experience had taught me that effective child welfare documentation required comprehensive analysis of caregiver motivation and decision-making patterns that revealed underlying attitudes toward child protection responsibility. Victoria's responses during questioning had provided substantial evidence of concerning perspectives that extended beyond isolated poor judgment. The psychological assessment component of my report addressed Victoria's attempts to manipulate Emma into accepting inappropriate treatment while discouraging disclosure of neglectful conditions. These manipulation strategies represented serious emotional abuse that required immediate intervention to prevent further psychological harm. Psychological manipulation assessment. The caregiver employed victim-blaming strategies designed to convince the child that substandard treatment was appropriate and that disclosure of actual conditions would represent inappropriate complaint. These manipulation techniques constitute emotional abuse that could result in long-term psychological damage if not immediately addressed through protective intervention. This analysis established the foundation for formal findings of both physical neglect and emotional abuse that would support comprehensive intervention measures designed to protect Emma and potentially other children who might be exposed to Victoria's inadequate caregiving practice. While completing the documentation process, I maintained focus on the broader implications of Victoria's actions for child protection within our community. My professional experience had demonstrated that caregivers who exhibited such fundamental disregard for visiting children's welfare often displayed concerning patterns in their treatment of their own children as well. The formal complaint I submitted through official channels included recommendations for comprehensive home assessment that would evaluate Victoria's overall parenting practices, safety planning that would prevent future exposure of visiting children to inappropriate conditions, and mandatory parenting education that would address her fundamental misunderstanding of child welfare responsibilities. These recommendations reflected evidence-based intervention strategies that had proven effective in addressing similar cases of deliberate neglect and caregiver entitlement. The systematic approach ensured comprehensive protection while providing Victoria with opportunities to demonstrate behavioral changes that could support family reunification under appropriate supervision. I also prepared Emma for the investigation process that would follow my formal complaint, explaining that another social worker would need to ask her questions about her weekend experience to ensure that appropriate protection measures were implemented. This preparation helped reduce Emma's anxiety about the formal procedures, while reinforcing that adult accountability was necessary to prevent similar mistreatment of other children. Emma, a social worker named Mr. Chim will want to talk with you about your visit to Aunt Victoria's house, I explained. He needs to understand exactly what happened so he can make sure other children don't have similar experiences. You can tell him anything you remember, and he will help make sure you stay safe. This explanation provided Emma with age-appropriate understanding of the investigation process while establishing clear expectations about her role in supporting accountability measures. My professional training had emphasized the importance of preparing children for formal interviews in ways that reduced stress while encouraging accurate disclosure of their experience. The evening concluded with completion of all formal documentation and submission of the official complaint complaint through established child protective services channels. The systematic approach I had employed ensured appropriate investigation while maintaining professional integrity and protecting Emma from additional exposure to Victoria's inappropriate treatment. As I reviewed the comprehensive evidence package I had prepared for Michael Chan's investigation, I felt profound satisfaction about utilizing my professional expertise to protect Emma while ensuring accountability for Victoria's deliberate neglect. The skills I had developed through years of advocating for vulnerable children had prepared me to respond effectively when my own daughter required similar protection. The formal investigation process would provide independent validation of my concerns while implementing protective measures that extended beyond our immediate family situation. Victoria's treatment of Emma had revealed concerning patterns that required professional assessment to ensure the safety of all children who might be exposed to her caregiving decisions. My career in child welfare had taught me that effective protection required systematic intervention through official channels rather than private family negotiations that often prioritized adult comfort over child safety. The documentation and formal complaint procedures I had implemented would ensure that Victoria faced appropriate consequences while receiving opportunities to address her fundamental misunderstanding of child welfare responsibilities. The transformation from family loyalty expectations, professional accountability measures, represented a crucial shift that would protect Emma while potentially benefiting other children in our community who deserved advocates willing to prioritize their safety over social convenience or family harmony. Victoria was about to discover that endangering children resulted in serious consequences, regardless of family relationships or historical patterns of enabling behavior. Monday morning arrived with the gravity that accompanies moments when professional principals must overcome personal relationships in service of child protection. I awakened with the profound sense of purpose that had originally motivated my career choice in child welfare. Knowing that the formal investigation process I had initiated would provide Emma with protection while holding Victoria accountable through established legal frameworks designed to safeguard vulnerable children. Senior investigator Michael Chan contacted me at precisely 8 o'clock to schedule the initial case review meeting that would establish the parameters for independent investigation of Victoria's actions. Michael possessed 15 years of experience in complex child welfare cases and had developed expertise in situations involving deliberate neglect and psychological manipulation that made him ideally suited to assess the evidence I had documented regarding Emma's weekend experience. Rebecca, I have reviewed the preliminary documentation you submitted regarding your daughter's treatment during the family visit, Michael stated during our phone conversation. The evidence you have gathered indicates serious child welfare violations that require immediate investigation and potential protective intervention. I will be contacting your sister within 24 hours to schedule the mandatory home assessment and interviews required by state regulation. This communication confirmed that the formal investigation process was proceeding according to established protocols that would ensure thorough evaluation of Victoria's home environment and parenting practices. Michael's professional approach demonstrated the systematic methodology that distinguished official child welfare investigations from private family dispute resolution attempts that often prioritized adult relationships over child safety consideration. The knowledge that Victoria would receive official notification of the investigation within hours provided me with satisfaction that transcended personal vindication. My professional training had taught me that effective child protection required systematic intervention through legal channels that possessed enforcement authority rather than voluntary cooperation that could be withdrawn when caregivers felt inconvenienced by accountability expectations. I spent Monday morning preparing Emma for the formal interview process that would be required as part of Michael's investigation. My experience conducting similar interviews with other children had taught me the importance of reducing anxiety through clear explanation of procedures, while reinforcing that adult accountability was necessary to prevent similar mistreatment of other children. Emma, Chen will want to talk with you about your weekend at Aunt Victoria's house, so he can understand exactly what happened, I explained during breakfast. He is a social worker whose job is to make sure children are treated properly when they visit other families. You can tell him anything you remember, and he will help make sure you stay safe. Emma's response reflected the emotional intelligence and resilience that had helped her navigate the challenging weekend experience, while maintaining clear understanding of appropriate treatment expectations. Her ability to articulate her experiences would provide Michael with crucial evidence for his assessment of Victoria's caregiving decisions and overall home environment. Will Mr. Chen make sure other kids don't have to sleep on cold floors when they visit Aunt Victoria? Emma asked, demonstrating her emerging understanding that the investigation process served broader protective purposes beyond her individual situation. This question revealed Emma's developing awareness that her difficult experience could contribute to protecting other children from similar mistreatment. The concept that personal adversity could be transformed into advocacy for others represented a powerful lesson that would influence Emma's future approach to challenges and her understanding of social responsibility. Tuesday afternoon brought the first official response from Victoria, who contacted me in a state of escalating panic after receiving notification from Michael Chen about the mandatory home assessment scheduled for the following day. Her phone call revealed the depth of her shock at discovering that family relationships would not shield her from professional accountability when child welfare violations had been documented through official channels. "Rebecca, you have completely lost your mind," Victoria began, her voice reflecting anger mixed with disbelief about the investigation process. "A social worker called and said he needs to inspect my house and interview my children because of some ridiculous complaint you filed. You cannot seriously believe that keeping Emma in the basement for 2 nights constitutes child abuse." This response demonstrated Victoria's continued minimization of her actions, while revealing her fundamental misunderstanding of both the severity of deliberate neglect and the legal standards that govern child welfare investigation. Her characterization of systematic mistreatment as a minor inconvenience confirmed the concerning attitudes that had motivated her inappropriate decisions regarding Emma's care. My response established clear boundaries about the investigation process, while reinforcing that her actions had created legal consequences that required resolution through official channels rather than family negotiation or manipulation strategies that had historically protected her from accountability. "Victoria, your deliberate decision to house Emma in substandard conditions while providing luxury accommodations for your children constitutes clear violations of child welfare standards," I stated firmly. "The investigation will proceed according to established legal protocols regardless of your opinions about the appropriateness of your actions. I recommend that you cooperate fully with the assessment process and consider seeking legal counsel if you have concerns about potential consequences." Victoria's escalating desperation became apparent as she realized that the investigation represented serious legal proceedings rather than family drama that could be resolved through emotional manipulation or parental pressure. Her subsequent threats revealed her intention to mobilize family members in attempts to pressure me into withdrawing the formal complaint. "I am calling our parents immediately," Victoria declared, invoking the family dynamics that had historically protected her from consequences while expecting me to prioritize family harmony over child protection. "They are going to be furious with you for involving government agencies in private family matters. You are destroying our family over nothing." This threat confirmed Victoria's continued reliance on enabling patterns that had shielded her from accountability throughout our shared history. However, she failed to recognize that my professional development had prepared me to withstand family pressure when child welfare required protective intervention through official channels that possessed legal authority to ensure appropriate consequence. Wednesday morning brought the anticipated contact from our parents, who had received Victoria's version of events and were attempting to pressure me into withdrawing the formal complaint in order to preserve family relationships. Their response reflected the generational patterns that had enabled Victoria's entitlement while discouraging accountability for inappropriate behavior toward family members. "Rebecca, your sister called us crying about some social worker who wants to investigate her house because of Emma's visit," our mother began during her phone call. "Victoria said you filed some kind of official complaint instead of talking to her privately about any concerns you might have had. This seems like a tremendous overreaction to a simple misunderstanding." This characterization of deliberate child neglect as a simple misunderstanding demonstrated the family minimization patterns that had historically protected Victoria from consequences while teaching me to accept differential treatment as normal family dynamics. However, my professional training had provided me with framework for understanding that effective child protection required accountability measures that transcended family loyalty consideration. My response to our parents established the professional standards that governed my decision-making when child welfare concerns required protective intervention, regardless of personal relationships or family pressure that might typically influence conflict resolution approach. The conditions Victoria provided for Emma constituted deliberate neglect that violates state child welfare standards, I explained calmly. My professional obligations require reporting such violations through official channels to ensure appropriate investigation and protection measures. Emma's safety is more important than maintaining family comfort zones that enable inappropriate treatment of children. Our parents' continued pressure reflected their long-established pattern of protecting Victoria from consequences while expecting me to prioritize family harmony over principles that conflicted with their preference. However, their arguments revealed fundamental mental understanding of both the severity of Victoria's actions and my professional responsibilities when confronted with documented child endangerment. You are choosing your job over your family, our father argued, attempting to create false dichotomy between professional principles and family loyalty that ignored the child protection obligations that superseded personal relationships when safety concerns arose. This manipulation strategy demonstrated the enabling patterns that had allowed Victoria to avoid accountability throughout her adult life, while creating expectations that I should compromise professional standards to protect her from consequences she had created through her own choices. The family pressure confirmed that Victoria's concerning attitudes toward child welfare had been reinforced through years of protection from appropriate consequences. Thursday brought Michael Chen's preliminary findings from his comprehensive assessment of Victoria's home environment and interviews with family members. His professional evaluation confirmed the concerns I had documented while revealing additional patterns that elevated the situation beyond isolated poor judgment into systematic problems with Victoria's approach to child care responsibility. Rebecca, the home assessment has revealed significant concerns about the differential treatment your sister provides to visiting children compared to her biological children, Michael reported during our phone conversation. The basement conditions where Emma was housed are completely inappropriate for child occupancy, and your sister's explanations for these arrangements demonstrate concerning attitudes about child welfare responsibility. Michael's findings validated the evidence I had gathered while providing independent professional assessment that would support appropriate intervention measures designed to protect both Emma and other children who might be exposed to Victoria's inadequate caregiving decisions in the future. The interview process with Victoria's children had revealed additional concerning information about household dynamics that suggested broader patterns of inappropriate treatment beyond the specific incidents involving Emma's weekend visit. Michael's expertise in recognizing signs of emotional manipulation and differential treatment had enabled him to identify systematic problems that required comprehensive intervention rather than isolated correction. The children's statements indicate that visiting family members regularly receive substantially different treatment than the household children. Michael continued, "This pattern suggests deliberate discriminatory practices rather than resource limitations or oversight error. Your sister's responses to questioning have demonstrated minimal insight about appropriate child care standards and resistance to accepting responsibility for harmful decisions." These findings confirmed that Victoria's treatment of Emma represented systematic approach to child welfare rather than isolated poor judgment that could be addressed through simple education or awareness intervention. The pattern of deliberate discrimination based on family status required comprehensive protective measures that would prevent future mistreatment, while addressing underlying attitudes that motivated inappropriate caregiving decisions. Michael's professional assessment included recommendations for mandatory parenting education, supervised visitation restrictions for non-household children, and follow-up monitoring that would ensure compliance with child welfare standards designed to protect visiting family members from discriminatory treatment. These intervention measures reflected evidence-based approaches that had proven effective in addressing similar cases of deliberate neglect and caregiver entitlement. Friday afternoon brought the official notification of findings and required interventions that Michael had developed based on his comprehensive investigation. The formal report confirmed violations of multiple child welfare standards, while establishing protective measures that would prevent future mistreatment of visiting children in Victoria's home environment. The intervention plan required Victoria to complete 40 hours of parenting education focused on appropriate child care standards, submit to quarterly home assessments for 12 months, obtain written approval from Child Protective Services before hosting overnight visits from non-household children. These requirements represented serious consequences that would significantly impact Victoria's autonomy while ensuring ongoing protection for vulnerable children. Victoria's response to the intervention requirements revealed her continued expectation that family relationships would shield her from meaningful consequences, while demonstrating her fundamental resistance to accepting accountability for documented child welfare violations. "This is completely insane," Victoria protested during her phone call about the official findings. "I am not going to submit to government interference in my private family life because you decided to overreact about Emma's sleeping arrangements. These requirements are ridiculous and invasive." This resistance confirmed that Victoria remained unchanged in her attitudes toward child welfare responsibilities and continued to prioritize her personal convenience over protective measures designed to safeguard vulnerable children. Her refusal to acknowledge the severity of her actions validated the necessity of formal intervention through legal channels that possessed enforcement authority regardless of her cooperation or consent. The successful completion of the formal investigation process provided me with profound satisfaction about utilizing professional expertise to protect Emma while ensuring accountability that extended beyond our immediate family situation. The systematic approach had resulted in appropriate consequences that would protect other children, while offering Victoria opportunities to demonstrate behavioral changes through required education and supervision. The weekend following the official notification of Child Protective Services findings marked the beginning of the most intense family pressure campaign I had experienced throughout my adult life. Victoria had mobilized our extended family network in a coordinated effort to convince me to withdraw the formal complaint and request dismissal of the intervention requirements that threatened her autonomy and social standing within our community. Her strategy reflected the manipulation tactics that had historically protected her from consequences, while expecting others to prioritize her comfort over principles that conflicted with her preferences. Saturday morning brought the first wave of contact from relatives who had received Victoria's carefully crafted version of events that portrayed her as the victim of my professional overreach and governmental interference in private family matters. Her narrative deliberately omitted the documented evidence of deliberate neglect while characterizing my protective actions as vindictive retaliation motivated by long-standing family jealousy, rather than legitimate child welfare concerns. Uncle Rob, our father's brother and a retired military officer who commanded respect within our extended family, initiated the pressure campaign, with a phone call that combined emotional manipulation with appeals to family loyalty that had proven effective in previous situations where Victoria faced potential consequences for inappropriate behavior. "Rebecca, your aunt and I are deeply concerned about this situation with Victoria and the social services investigation," Uncle Robert began, his voice carrying the authoritative tone that had historically influenced family decision-making during conflicts that required resolution. "Victoria is devastated about these accusations, and she explained that this entire situation resulted from a simple misunderstanding about sleeping arrangements during Emma's visit. This characterization of systematic child neglect as a simple misunderstanding reflected the family minimization patterns that had enabled Victoria's entitlement throughout our shared history while discouraging accountability for actions that harmed other family members. Uncle Robert's intervention demonstrated how effectively Victoria had mobilized sympathetic relatives relatives through selective disclosure that concealed the severity of her documented violation. My response established the professional standards that governed my decision-making when child welfare concerns required protective intervention, regardless of family pressure that might typically influence conflict resolution approaches within our extended family network. Uncle Robert, the evidence clearly demonstrates that Victoria deliberately housed Emma in substandard basement conditions while providing luxury accommodations for her own children, I explained calmly. These actions constitute violations of basic child welfare standards that required formal reporting through official channels designed to protect vulnerable children from systematic mistreatment. Uncle Robert's reaction revealed his discomfort with professional frameworks that supersede traditional family authority structures and his preference for informal resolution methods that prioritized family harmony over protective measures that might create social complications for family members. "You are destroying family relationships over bureaucratic technicalities," Uncle Robert argued, attempting to reframe documented child endangerment as administrative confusion rather than serious violations that required accountability through legal channels. Victoria made a mistake in judgment, but involving government agencies in private family matters creates problems that extend far beyond this isolated incident. This perspective demonstrated the generational attitudes that had historically protected Victoria from consequences while teaching family members to minimize harmful behavior in order to maintain social cohesion. However, my professional training had provided me with framework for understanding that effective child protection required accountability measures that transcended family loyalty considerations when safety concerns arose. Sunday brought additional pressure from our maternal grandmother, Elena Rodriguez, whose opinions carried significant influence within our family hierarchy due to her status as the family matriarch and her historical role in mediating conflicts that threatened family stability. Her intervention represented the most emotionally challenging aspect of the pressure campaign because of my genuine respect for her wisdom and my desire to maintain our close relationship. Nisha, I raised 6 children and never had problems with government workers interfering in family matters, grandmother Elena stated during her phone call. Victoria made mistakes, but families should handle these problems privately rather than involving outsiders who do not understand our relationships and history. This perspective reflected traditional family values that emphasized internal resolution of conflicts while viewing external intervention as inappropriate intrusion into private relationships that should be managed through family discussion and compromise rather than formal accountability measures. My response to grandmother Elena required careful balance between respect for her position within our family structure and commitment to professional principles that had motivated my career choice in child welfare. The conversation represented a crucial test of my ability to maintain professional standards when facing emotional pressure from family members whose approval had historically influenced my decision-making. Abuela, I understand your preference for family solutions, but my professional training has taught me that children deserve protection through systems designed specifically to ensure their safety, I explained respectfully. Emma's treatment violated legal standards that exist to protect all children from harm, regardless of family relationships that might discourage accountability. Grandmother Elena's continued pressure reflected her genuine concern about family unity while demonstrating limited understanding. Contemporary child welfare standards that had evolved beyond traditional family authority models that prioritized adult preferences over child protection considerations. Monday morning brought escalation of the family pressure campaign through our parents' decision to drive from their home in Phoenix to Portland for an in-person confrontation designed to convince me to withdraw the formal complaint before Victoria faced additional consequences through the mandatory compliance process. Their arrival represented the most serious family intervention I had experienced and created significant stress about maintaining professional boundaries when facing direct emotional manipulation from people whose approval had shaped my identity throughout my development. Our parents arrived at my office during lunch hour, creating a public confrontation that was clearly designed to increase pressure through professional embarrassment and colleague observation of family conflict that reflected poorly on my judgment and family relationship. Their strategy demonstrated sophisticated understanding of social pressure tactics while revealing their determination to protect Victoria from accountability regardless of the documented evidence of child endangerment. "Rebecca, we need to discuss this situation with Victoria immediately," our father announced upon entering my office without appointment or advance notice. "This investigation is causing tremendous stress for the entire family, and you need to find a way to resolve this matter without destroying family relationships that have taken decades to build." The public nature of their confrontation created additional pressure through professional embarrassment while demonstrating their expectation that social discomfort would motivate me to prioritize family harmony over principles that had guided my career development and personal growth. Their approach reflected sophisticated manipulation tactics that had proven effective in previous situations where my professional decisions conflicted with family preferences. My response required maintenance of professional composure while establishing clear boundaries about the investigation process that could not be influenced through family pressure or emotional manipulation designed to compromise my commitment to child protection principles. The Child Protective Services investigation will proceed according to established legal protocols, regardless of family opinions about the appropriateness of accountability measures, I stated firmly. Victoria's actions created legal consequences that require resolution through official channels designed to ensure child safety rather than family negotiations that might prioritize adult comfort over protective intervention. Our parents' reaction revealed their shock at discovering that family relationships would not override professional obligations when child welfare concerns required protective action through legal frameworks that possessed enforcement authority regardless of family cooperation or consent. "You are choosing your career over your family," our mother declared, employing the false dichotomy argument that had historically pressured me to compromise professional standards in order to maintain family approval. Victoria needs support, not persecution, from her own sister, who should understand family loyalty. This manipulation strategy demonstrated the enabling patterns that had protected Victoria from consequences throughout her adult life, while creating expectations that family members should prioritize her comfort over principles that might create accountability for inappropriate behavior. The emotional pressure confirmed that Victoria's concerning attitudes toward child welfare had been reinforced through years of protection from natural consequences. Tuesday brought the most disturbing escalation of family pressure through Victoria's decision to bring her children to my office, an attempt to use their presence as emotional leverage designed to convince me that my protective actions were harming innocent family members who deserved consideration beyond the documented child welfare violation. "Rebecca, look what you are doing to my children," Victoria announced upon arriving with 7-year-old Sophia, 5-year-old Marcus, and 3-year-old Isabella. "They are confused and upset about strangers asking questions about our family because of your ridiculous complaint about Emma's visit." This manipulation tactic represented the most concerning escalation of Victoria's pressure campaign because it demonstrated her willingness to exploit her own children's emotional welfare in order to avoid accountability for documented neglect that had endangered Emma during her weekend visit. The strategy revealed fundamental problems with Victoria's understanding of appropriate parent-child boundaries and protective decision-making. My professional training had prepared me to recognize child exploitation tactics that caregivers employed when facing accountability measures that threatened their autonomy or social standing. Victoria's decision to involve her children in adult conflict resolution demonstrated the same concerning judgment that had motivated her inappropriate treatment of Emma during the family visit. Victoria, involving your children in adult conflicts represents another concerning decision that demonstrates poor understanding of appropriate protective boundaries, I responded firmly. Your children deserve protection from family stress rather than exploitation, as emotional leverage in disputes about accountability for documented child welfare violation concerns, while demonstrating Victoria's continued inability to prioritize child protection over her personal preferences for avoiding consequences through manipulation strategies. Wednesday brought resolution of the family pressure campaign through my decision to request a meeting with all involved family members to establish clear boundaries about the investigation process while providing factual information about the documented evidence that had motivated formal intervention through Child Protective Services channel. The meeting took place at my office during evening hours and included our parents, Uncle Robert, grandmother Elena, and Victoria with her husband James. The gathering provided opportunity to present comprehensive evidence about Emma's treatment while addressing family misconceptions that had been created through Victoria's selective disclosure of events. I have requested this meeting to provide accurate information about the documented child welfare violations that motivated the formal investigation. I began distributing copies of photographic evidence and official findings that demonstrated the severity of Victoria's action. The evidence clearly shows deliberate neglect that required protective intervention, regardless of family relationships that might typically influence conflict resolution. The presentation of factual evidence created immediate shift in family dynamics as relatives observed concrete documentation of basement conditions and differential treatment that contradicted Victoria's narrative about minor misunderstandings or resource limitation. The photographic evidence provided undeniable proof of systematic neglect that elevated the situation beyond family dispute territory into serious child protection concerns. Uncle Robert's reaction reflected the shock that accompanied realization about the actual conditions Emma had endured during her weekend visit and the deliberate nature of Victoria's decisions to provide substandard accommodations while maintaining luxury conditions for her own children. Victoria, these photographs show completely inappropriate conditions for any child, Uncle Robert stated, his voice reflecting growing understanding about the severity of actions that Victoria had minimized through selective disclosure. Emma was sleeping on concrete floors, while your children enjoyed comfortable bedrooms upstairs. This acknowledgement represented the beginning of family recognition that the investigation represented appropriate protective intervention rather than professional overreach, motivated by personal vindictiveness or governmental interference in private family matters. The meeting concluded with family agreement that the Child Protective Services investigation should proceed without interference, while Victoria completed the required compliance measures designed to ensure appropriate treatment of visiting children in the future. The systematic presentation of evidence had overcome family pressure while establishing support for protective measures that would benefit Emma and other vulnerable children who might require similar advocacy. The weeks following the family confrontation marked a period of significant transformation in both Victoria's behavior and our family dynamics, as the mandatory compliance process began reshaping long-established patterns of entitlement and enabling that had historically protected inappropriate conduct from natural consequence. Victoria's enrollment in the required parenting education program represented her first serious engagement with professional standards that governed appropriate child care practice, while the ongoing supervision requirements ensured consistent monitoring of her progress toward meeting basic child welfare expectations. Sarah Martinez, the licensed family counselor assigned to coordinate Victoria's compliance program, possessed extensive experience in working with caregivers who demonstrated concerning attitudes toward child welfare responsibility. Her systematic approach emphasized education about developmental needs, exploration of underlying beliefs that influenced caregiving decisions, and practical skill development in areas where deficiencies had been identified through the formal assessment process. Victoria has significant learning to accomplish regarding appropriate treatment of all children in her care, not just her biological children, Dr. Martinez reported during our monthly coordination call. The assessment process revealed fundamental gaps in her understanding of child welfare standards and concerning attitudes about differential treatment based on family status that require comprehensive intervention. This professional evaluation confirmed the severity of Victoria's knowledge deficits, while providing structured framework for addressing the underlying beliefs and attitudes that had motivated her deliberate neglect of Emma during the family visit. The educational component of her compliance plan addressed both practical skills and psychological factors that influenced her decision-making about child care responsibilities. The parenting education curriculum required Victoria to complete modules focused on child development, appropriate supervision standards, environmental safety assessment, and non-discriminatory treatment protocols that applied to all children regardless of their relationship to the primary caregiver. Each module included practical exercises designed to help participants recognize and address problematic attitudes while developing improved decision-making capabilities. Victoria's initial resistance to the educational requirements reflected her continued expectation that minimal compliance would satisfy the formal obligations while allowing her to maintain fundamentally unchanged attitudes about appropriate child treatment. Her early participation demonstrated reluctant cooperation rather than genuine engagement with the learning objectives that could produce meaningful behavioral changes. "The mandatory classes are completely ridiculous," Victoria complained during one of our limited phone conversations. "They are teaching basic information that any competent parent already knows. This entire process is insulting and unnecessary for someone with my education and professional background." This response revealed Victoria's continued inability to recognize the severity of her documented violations, while demonstrating persistent entitlement attitudes that had motivated the original neglectful behavior. Her characterization of child welfare education as insulting confirmed the necessity of ongoing supervision that could monitor her progress toward accepting accountability for appropriate behavioral change. "My professional experience had taught me that caregivers who demonstrated such resistance to learning about child welfare standards often required extended supervision periods before achieving sustainable behavioral modification." Victoria's attitude suggested that genuine transformation would require significant time and consistent external accountability, rather than brief educational intervention, followed by unsupervised autonomy. The quarterly home assessment process provided ongoing evaluation of Victoria's living environment and caregiving practices, while ensuring compliance with safety standards designed to protect visiting children from discriminatory treatment. Senior investigator Michael Chen conducted these assessments with the systematic thoroughness that characterized professional child welfare evaluation. Victoria has made some improvements in the physical environment, particularly in establishing appropriate guest accommodations that meet basic safety and comfort standards, Michael reported following the first quarterly assessment. However, her verbal responses during interviews continue to reflect concerning attitudes about the appropriateness of differential treatment for visiting children compared to household members. This evaluation indicated that Victoria had implemented minimal physical changes necessary to satisfy immediate compliance requirements, while maintaining underlying beliefs that could motivate future inappropriate decisions if external supervision were discontinued prematurely. The pattern suggested that superficial modifications were occurring without fundamental attitude shifts that could ensure sustainable protection for vulnerable children. The ongoing supervision process also included periodic interviews with Victoria's children to monitor family dynamics and ensure that compliance efforts were not creating additional stress or problems within the household environment. These interviews provided important information about whether Victoria was genuinely implementing improved caregiving practices or merely performing compliance behaviors when external monitoring was present. During the third month of compliance monitoring, a significant development occurred that demonstrated the broader protective value of the intervention measures beyond Emma's individual situation. A neighbor family contacted Child Protective Services to report concerning observations about Victoria's treatment of visiting children that predated Emma's weekend experience, but had not previously been investigated through official channels. The neighbor family, David and Linda Chen, lived adjacent to Victoria's property and had observed multiple instances over the previous year where visiting children appeared to receive substantially different treatment than Victoria's biological children during family gatherings and extended visits. Their willingness to provide formal statements about these observations had been motivated by learning about the current investigation and recognizing the importance of documenting patterns that could protect other children. We witnessed several occasions where visiting family children were excluded from activities, provided different meal arrangements, and appeared to receive less supervision and attention than the household children. Linda Chen reported in her formal statement. We had been concerned about these patterns, but were unsure whether intervention was appropriate given the family relationship dynamics involved. This testimony provided crucial evidence that Victoria's treatment of Emma represented systematic discriminatory practices, rather than isolated poor judgment during a single stressful weekend. The neighbor observations confirmed that multiple children had been subjected to inappropriate treatment that violated basic fairness and safety standards over an extended period. Michael Chen's investigation of these additional reports revealed a concerning pattern of behavior that elevated Victoria's case from individual oversight failure to systematic child welfare violations that required enhanced supervision and more comprehensive intervention measures. The expanded scope of documented problems supported extending the monitoring period and increasing the intensity of required educational programs. The neighbor reports indicate that Victoria has engaged in discriminatory treatment of visiting children on multiple occasions over the past 18 months. Michael informed me during our case coordination meeting. This pattern suggests systematic problems with her understanding of appropriate caregiving responsibilities that require more intensive intervention than originally planned. The discovery of additional violations provided vindication for my decision to pursue formal investigation rather than accepting Victoria's minimization of her actions as isolated mistakes that could be resolved through family discussion. The systematic nature of her inappropriate behavior confirmed that only professional intervention through legal channels could provide adequate protection for vulnerable children. My own professional development during this period reflected the profound satisfaction that accompanies successful advocacy for vulnerable individuals who lack effective protection within their existing support system. The systematic application of child welfare expertise to protect Emma while ensuring broader community safety represented the fulfillment of career aspirations that had motivated my original interest in social work practice. The validation provided by independent professional assessment and documented evidence of Victoria's violations confirmed that my protective actions had been both necessary and appropriate despite family pressure that had attempted to characterize them as professional overreach. The successful intervention demonstrated the value of maintaining professional standards when child welfare concerns conflicted with social comfort or family loyalty expectations. Emma's recovery from her traumatic weekend experience progressed steadily throughout the compliance monitoring period with support from therapeutic services designed to help children process difficult experiences while developing resilience and advocacy skills. Her ability to articulate her experiences during the investigation process had contributed significantly to ensuring appropriate protective measures while demonstrating remarkable emotional intelligence for her. Emma has shown excellent progress in understanding that the treatment she received was inappropriate and that speaking up about concerning situations is the right thing to do, reported Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the child therapist who had been working with Emma to process her experience. She has developed increased confidence in her ability to recognize appropriate boundaries and advocate for herself in future situations. This therapeutic progress reflected Emma's natural resilience, while confirming the value of professional support in helping children recover from neglectful treatment. Her improved understanding of appropriate expectations would provide protection in future situations, while developing advocacy skills that could benefit other children who might face similar challenges. The broader community impact of Victoria's case extended beyond our immediate family situation through the awareness it created among neighbors, school personnel, and other community members about recognizing and reporting concerning treatment of visiting children. The successful intervention had demonstrated that protective action was both possible and effective when individuals, with appropriate expertise were willing to prioritize child welfare over social convenience. My colleagues within the Child Protective Services system had expressed appreciation for my willingness to apply professional standards to protect my own daughter despite family pressure that might have discouraged formal intervention. The case had served as an important example of how personal and professional obligations could be successfully integrated when child welfare concerns required protective action. Your handling of this situation demonstrates the kind of principled practice that our profession requires, Supervisor Patricia Williams commented during my annual performance evaluation. Your willingness to pursue appropriate intervention despite family pressure exemplifies the commitment to child protection that should guide all of our decision-making when vulnerable individuals require advocacy. This professional recognition confirmed that my protective actions had rather than compromised my standing within the child welfare system, while demonstrating that personal experience with family dysfunction could strengthen rather than undermine professional capabilities when properly channeled through established legal framework. By the 6th month of compliance monitoring, Victoria had completed the required educational programming and demonstrated sufficient improvement in her understanding of child welfare standards to warrant consideration for reduced supervision intensity. However, the ongoing monitoring requirements would continue for the full 12-month period to ensure sustainable behavioral changes, rather than temporary compliance performance. Victoria has made significant progress in understanding appropriate caregiving standards and has demonstrated improved decision-making capabilities during recent assessments, Dr. Martinez reported. However, the systematic nature of her previous violations and the time required to establish sustainable behavioral patterns support continuing the full supervision period as originally planned. This evaluation reflected the careful balance between recognizing genuine improvement and ensuring adequate protection through comprehensive monitoring that could detect any regression in appropriate practice. The systematic approach prioritized child safety over administrative convenience, while providing Victoria with clear expectations for maintaining compliance. The transformation in family dynamics throughout the compliance period had been remarkable, with previously enabling relatives developing increased understanding of appropriate child welfare standards and reduced tolerance for excuses that minimized concerning behavior. The educational impact of the investigation had extended beyond Victoria to influence broader family attitudes about child protection responsibility. Uncle Robert had become particularly supportive of ongoing supervision requirements after observing Victoria's progress through the educational programming and recognizing the importance of external accountability in ensuring sustainable behavioral change. His evolving perspective demonstrated how factual evidence could overcome initial resistance while building support for protective measures. I can see now that this intervention was necessary to protect Emma and other children from treatment that none of us should have tolerated, Uncle Robert acknowledged during a family gathering. Rebecca's professional training helped her recognize problems that the rest of us missed or minimized, and her courage to act protected children who deserved better advocacy from all of us. This family recognition represented validation of my decision to prioritize professional principles over social pressure, while demonstrating how successful protective action could ultimately strengthen, rather than damage family relationships by establishing healthier boundaries and expectations. The successful resolution of Victoria's case marked a transformative period in my professional development, as I began recognizing how personal experiences with family dysfunction could enhance rather than compromise my effectiveness as a child protective services investigator. The intersection of personal advocacy and professional expertise had revealed capabilities that I had not previously understood, while demonstrating the profound impact that principled action could generate within complex family systems and broader community networks. My approach to subsequent investigations evolved to incorporate insights gained through the challenging process of protecting Emma, while navigating family pressure that had attempted to override child welfare consideration. The experience had provided practical knowledge about resistance strategies that caregivers employed when facing accountability measures, while developing enhanced skills in maintaining professional boundaries when emotional manipulation attempted to compromise protective action. Patricia Williams, my supervisor had observed significant growth in my investigative capabilities following the successful intervention in Victoria's case. Her assessment reflected recognition that personal experience with family-enabling patterns had strengthened my ability to identify and address similar dynamics in other cases where vulnerable children required protection from systemic neglect or discriminatory treatment. Rebecca has demonstrated exceptional professional growth through her handling of the family situation involving her sister, Dr. Williams noted in my performance evaluation. Her ability to maintain professional standards despite intense personal pressure exemplifies the kind of principled practice that produces meaningful protection for vulnerable children while creating sustainable behavioral changes in problematic family systems. This professional recognition validated my conviction that personal adversity could be transformed into advocacy tools that benefited individuals facing similar challenges when properly channeled through established legal frameworks and evidence-based intervention strategies. The successful application of child welfare expertise to protect Emma had confirmed the value of career choices that prioritized vulnerable populations over more comfortable professional alternatives. The enhanced credibility that resulted from successful family intervention had created new opportunities for leadership within the Child Protective Services system. My colleagues began requesting consultation on complex cases involving family resistance, caregiver manipulation, or systematic discrimination that required sophisticated intervention strategies beyond standard assessment protocol. Case consultation requests had increased substantially as word spread about my ability to navigate challenging family dynamics while maintaining focus on child protection outcomes rather than adult comfort or social convenience. These opportunities provided platforms for sharing knowledge about effective advocacy techniques while contributing to improved practices that could benefit children throughout our service region. One particularly significant consultation involved the Henderson family, where 3 children were experiencing differential treatment based on their perceived developmental disabilities compared to their neurotypical siblings. The caregivers had developed elaborate justifications for providing substandard accommodations and reduced attention to the children with special needs, while maintaining that their approaches represented reasonable resource allocation rather than discriminatory practices. The Henderson case presents similar patterns to what you documented in your sister's situation, explained senior investigator David Kim during our consultation meeting. The caregivers are providing differential treatment while using sophisticated arguments to justify inappropriate decisions. We need your expertise in recognizing manipulation strategies and developing intervention approaches that address underlying attitudes rather than just immediate compliance behavior. This consultation opportunity allowed me to apply lessons learned from Victoria's case to protect other vulnerable children while demonstrating how professional knowledge gained through personal experience could generate broader protective impact within our community. The systematic approach that had proven effective with Victoria provided framework for addressing similar caregiver resistance in other family systems. My intervention strategy for the Henderson case incorporated comprehensive documentation methods, systematic evidence presentation, and structured educational requirements that addressed both practical skills and underlying belief systems that influenced caregiving decisions. The approach reflected refinements in technique that had emerged through experience with Victoria's compliance process and family resistance pattern. The Henderson case investigation revealed systematic violations of disability rights protections, in addition to basic child welfare standards, creating opportunities to pursue enhanced accountability measures while ensuring comprehensive protection for the affected children. The successful intervention resulted in significant improvements in the children's living conditions while establishing monitoring protocols that could prevent future discriminatory treatment. Your consultation on the Henderson case produced exceptional outcomes for 3 children who had been subjected to systematic discrimination, David Kim reported following the successful resolution. The intervention strategies you recommended resulted in meaningful behavioral changes while creating sustainable protection through ongoing supervision and educational requirement. This This success confirmed that expertise developed through personal advocacy could be effectively transferred to benefit other vulnerable individuals when applied through professional channels that possessed appropriate legal authority and enforcement capability. The expanding consultation role provided opportunities to influence child protection practices beyond my individual caseload, while contributing to systemic improvements in intervention effectiveness. Emma's continued recovery and development throughout this period reflected the positive long-term impact of successful protective intervention, while demonstrating her emerging understanding of advocacy principles that could influence her future approach to social justice issues. Her ability to articulate her experiences had contributed to multiple successful investigations, while developing confidence in her capacity to recognize and respond to concerning situations. Emma has shown remarkable growth in understanding appropriate boundaries and developing advocacy skills that will serve her well throughout her life, reported Dr. Jennifer Walsh during our final therapy session. Her experience with the investigation process has taught her that speaking up about concerning situations can create positive change, while protecting other people who might be vulnerable to similar treatment. This therapeutic outcome demonstrated that children could recover from traumatic experiences while developing increased resilience and advocacy capabilities when provided with appropriate support and professional intervention. Emma's growth confirmed the value of pursuing protective action, even when family pressure attempted to discourage formal intervention through official channels. The broader community education component that had emerged from Victoria's case continued generating positive impact through increased awareness about recognizing and reporting concerning treatment of visiting children in family settings. Neighbors, teachers, and community members had developed enhanced understanding of child welfare standards, while gaining confidence in their ability to pursue protective action when necessary. Linda Chen, the neighbor who had reported additional concerning observations about Victoria's treatment of visiting children, had become an advocate for community education about child protection responsibility. Her willingness to speak publicly about the importance of reporting concerning behavior had influenced other community members to develop increased vigilance about child welfare issues. The investigation of Victoria's case taught our entire neighborhood about recognizing concerning treatment patterns and understanding our responsibility to protect vulnerable children, Mrs. Chen explained during a community education presentation. Rebecca's professional expertise and courage to act created awareness that has made our community safer for all children who visit or live here. This community impact demonstrated how individual advocacy could generate systemic changes that extended far beyond immediate protective action, while creating networks of informed citizens who possessed knowledge and motivation to protect vulnerable individuals. The educational effect had multiplied the protective value of the original intervention through increased community capacity for recognizing and addressing child welfare concerns. My professional reputation within the Regional Child Protective Services Network had evolved to include recognition as a specialist in complex family dynamics involving caregiver resistance and systematic discrimination. This expertise had created opportunities to participate in training development, policy consultation, and legislative testimony that could influence child protection practices across multiple jurisdictions. The Oregon Department of Human Services had requested my participation in developing training curricula for new child protective services investigators that incorporated lessons learned from challenging cases involving family manipulation and systematic neglect. The training development opportunity provided platforms for sharing knowledge about effective intervention strategies while contributing to improved professional practices throughout the state system. Rebecca's experience with complex family dynamics and her demonstrated ability to maintain professional standards despite intense personal pressure make her uniquely qualified to train new investigators, explained Regional Director Susan Martin. Her practical knowledge about resistance strategies and intervention techniques will enhance the capabilities of new professionals entering our field. This training development role represented recognition that personal experience with challenging family systems could enhance professional capabilities when properly integrated with established child welfare frameworks and evidence-based practice. The opportunity to influence training standards provided potential for creating lasting impact on child protection effectiveness throughout the region. Legislative testimony opportunities had emerged through recognition of my expertise in cases involving family resistance to child welfare intervention and the effectiveness of systematic compliance monitoring in producing sustainable behavioral changes. State legislators seeking to strengthen child protection statutes had requested my input on policy development that could enhance protective capabilities while ensuring appropriate due process protection. The testimony I provided to the Oregon State Legislature emphasized the importance of comprehensive compliance monitoring that addressed underlying attitudes rather than just immediate behavioral modification. My recommendations focused on strengthening educational requirements while ensuring adequate supervision periods that could detect and address regression in appropriate caregiving practices. Professional intervention that includes both immediate protection and long-term behavioral modification produces superior outcomes for vulnerable children while creating sustainable changes in family systems. I testified before the House Committee on Human Service. Comprehensive compliance programs that address underlying attitudes and provide ongoing supervision ensure lasting protection rather than temporary performance improvements. This legislative input provided opportunities to influence policy development that could benefit vulnerable children throughout the state, while demonstrating how professional expertise gained through challenging personal experiences could contribute to systemic improvements in child protection capability. The mentorship responsibilities that had evolved from my enhanced professional standing included supervising new child protective services investigators while providing guidance about maintaining professional boundaries when facing family pressure or community resistance to protective intervention. These mentorship opportunities allowed me to share practical knowledge about effective advocacy techniques while supporting the development of principled professionals. My mentorship approach emphasized the importance of systematic documentation, evidence-based decision-making, and maintaining focus on child welfare outcomes rather than adult comfort or social convenience. The guidance I provided to new investigators reflected lessons learned through Victoria's case about the necessity of pursuing formal intervention through official channels when child safety required protective action. Rebecca's mentorship has been invaluable in helping me understand how to maintain professional standards when facing pressure to compromise child protection principles, reported Jennifer Adams, a new investigator I had been supervising. Her practical advice about resistance strategies and intervention techniques has enhanced my confidence in pursuing appropriate accountability measures, despite social pressure to prioritize family harmony over child safety. This mentorship impact confirmed that successful advocacy generate multiplier effects through knowledge transfer that enhanced the capabilities of other professionals, while creating networks of principled practitioners who possessed skills and motivation to protect vulnerable individuals effectively. The personal satisfaction that accompanied these professional developments reflected the profound meaning that emerges when career choices align with fundamental values about protecting vulnerable individuals from systemic harm. The transformation of personal adversity into advocacy tools created opportunities for generating positive impact that extended far beyond my individual circumstances, while contributing to improved protection for countless children who would benefit from enhanced professional practices and community awareness. 18 months following the initiation of formal intervention, the comprehensive assessment of outcomes revealed remarkable transformations in both individual circumstances and systemic practices that demonstrated the enduring value of principled advocacy when applied through appropriate professional channels. Victoria's compliance with mandatory requirements had progressed beyond minimal adherence to genuine understanding of child welfare standards, while Emma's recovery had evolved into advocacy capabilities that would serve her throughout her development into responsible citizenship. The final evaluation conducted by Dr. Sarah Martinez confirmed substantial behavioral changes in Victoria's approach to childcare responsibilities that extended far beyond temporary performance modifications designed to satisfy external oversight requirements.
Her participation in educational programming had generated authentic shifts in perspective regarding appropriate treatment standards for all children under her supervision, regardless of their relationship to her immediate family structure.
Victoria has demonstrated comprehensive understanding of child welfare principles and has implemented sustainable practices that ensure appropriate treatment for visiting children. Dr. Martinez reported during the case closure evaluation. Her transformation represents genuine behavioral change rather than superficial compliance performance, indicating successful intervention that has created lasting protection for vulnerable children who may require care in her home environment. This professional assessment validated the effectiveness of systematic intervention strategies that addressed underlying attitudes and belief systems, rather than focusing exclusively on immediate behavioral corrections. The comprehensive approach had required substantial time investment and consistent external monitoring, but had produced meaningful changes that could protect children throughout Victoria's future caregiving responsibilities. Victoria's own reflections on the intervention process revealed significant growth in her understanding of the harm that discriminatory treatment could inflict upon children, while acknowledging the necessity of external accountability measures that had motivated her behavioral changes. Her evolving perspective demonstrated the potential for positive transformation when appropriate intervention strategies addressed both practical skills and fundamental attitudes about child protection responsibilities. The educational requirements initially felt punitive and unnecessary, but the learning process helped me understand how my decisions about Emma's accommodations were genuinely harmful, rather than simply alternative arrangements, Victoria acknowledged during our first substantive conversation following the completion of her compliance requirement. I had never considered how differential treatment could affect a child's sense of security and belonging within family relationships. This recognition represented substantial progress from Victoria's initial minimization of her actions and resistance to accepting accountability for documented child welfare violations. Her ability to articulate the psychological impact of discriminatory treatment indicated genuine understanding that could guide appropriate decision-making in future situations involving vulnerable children. The quarterly home assessments conducted throughout the supervision period had documented progressive improvements in Victoria's preparation for hosting visiting children, including establishment of appropriate guest accommodations that met professional standards for safety, comfort, and dignity. Her investments in creating welcoming environments demonstrated commitment to ensuring positive experiences for children who might require temporary care within her household. Michael Chen's final assessment report confirmed that Victoria's home environment now exceeded minimum compliance standards, while reflecting thoughtful consideration of child welfare principles in all aspects of preparation for visiting family members. The transformation from deliberately inadequate accommodations to exemplary preparation represented remarkable behavioral change that protected children while strengthening family relationships. Victoria has established guest accommodations that demonstrate genuine understanding of appropriate child care standards and reflect commitment to ensuring positive experiences for visiting children. Michael documented in his final evaluation, the home environment now provides excellent models for other families seeking to create welcoming and appropriate conditions for temporary child care responsibility. This outcome confirmed the effectiveness of comprehensive intervention strategies that combined accountability measures with educational support and ongoing supervision designed to produce sustainable behavioral modification. The systematic approach had transformed a concerning family situation into an exemplary model that could benefit other families facing similar challenges. Emma's continued development throughout the post-intervention period reflected the resilience that emerges when children receive appropriate protection and therapeutic support following traumatic experience. Her ability to process the events surrounding Victoria's case had contributed to increased confidence in her capacity to recognize inappropriate treatment while developing advocacy skills that would serve her throughout her future development. Jennifer Walsh's final therapeutic assessment confirmed Emma's complete recovery from the traumatic weekend experience, while highlighting her emerging understanding of social justice principles that could influence her future approach to protecting vulnerable individuals. The therapeutic process had transformed a potentially damaging experience into educational opportunity that strengthened Emma's character and advocacy capabilities. Emma has developed exceptional resilience and advocacy skills through her experience with the investigation process, Walsh reported. Her understanding of appropriate boundaries and her confidence in speaking up about concerning situations will serve her well throughout her life, while potentially benefiting other children who may require similar protection. This therapeutic outcome demonstrated that children could recover completely from neglectful treatment when provided with appropriate professional support and systematic intervention that addressed both immediate safety concerns and long-term emotional development. Emma's growth confirmed the value of pursuing formal protective action despite family pressure that might discourage official intervention. The broader family dynamics had evolved substantially throughout the intervention period as relatives developed increased understanding of child welfare standards, while recognizing the importance of maintaining appropriate accountability measures that protected vulnerable family members. The educational impact of the investigation had influenced multiple generations of family members to adopt more protective attitudes about child welfare responsibility. Uncle Robert had become particularly supportive of ongoing vigilance regarding child protection issues within our extended family network, while expressing appreciation for the learning opportunities that the intervention had provided about recognizing and addressing concerning treatment patterns. His transformed perspective demonstrated how successful advocacy could generate positive influence throughout complex family systems. This experience taught our entire family about recognizing inappropriate treatment patterns and understanding our responsibility to protect vulnerable children, rather than minimizing concerning behavior for the sake of family harmony. Uncle Robert acknowledged during our most recent family gathering Rebecca's professional expertise and willingness to act appropriately protected Emma while educating all of us about child welfare standards that should guide our interactions with visiting family members. This family recognition confirmed that principled advocacy could ultimately strengthen rather than damage family relationships by establishing healthier boundaries and expectations that protected vulnerable individuals, while promoting authentic understanding of appropriate treatment standards. The intervention had created positive outcomes for the entire family system rather than simply addressing isolated problematic behavior. Grandmother Elena's evolving perspective reflected the generational impact of successful intervention, while demonstrating how traditional family authority structures could adapt to incorporate contemporary child welfare standards that protected vulnerable individuals more effectively than historical approaches that prioritized family loyalty over protective action. I have learned that protecting children requires courage to challenge inappropriate behavior even when it creates family conflict. Grandmother Elena reflected during our conversation about the case outcome. Rebecca's professional training helped her recognize problems that the rest of us missed, and her willingness to act protected Emma while teaching all of us about our responsibilities to ensure appropriate treatment for visiting children. This generational transformation represented one of the most significant outcomes of the intervention process, while demonstrating how successful advocacy could influence family systems across multiple generations to adopt improved practices that would benefit future children who might require protection from discriminatory or neglectful treatment. The community impact that had emerged from Victoria's case continued expanding through increased awareness about child welfare responsibilities and enhanced capacity for recognizing and reporting concerning treatment patterns that might require professional intervention. Neighbors, teachers, and community members had developed improved understanding of appropriate boundaries, while gaining confidence in their ability to pursue protective action when necessary. The neighborhood education initiative that had developed through Ms. Linda Chen's advocacy had resulted in multiple additional reports of concerning treatment patterns that required investigation, while demonstrating the multiplier effect that successful intervention could generate within communities committed to protecting vulnerable individuals. The enhanced community vigilance had created safer environments for all children while establishing networks of informed citizens who possessed knowledge and motivation to act appropriately. The education we received through Rebecca's case has made our entire community more aware of child welfare issues and more prepared to take appropriate action when we observe concerning treatment patterns. Ms. Chen explained during a community presentation about child protection responsibilities. We have learned that protecting children requires active engagement rather than passive observation when we witness inappropriate behavior. This community transformation demonstrated how individual advocacy could generate systemic changes that created lasting protection for vulnerable populations while establishing cultural shifts that prioritized child welfare over social convenience or family loyalty considerations that might discourage protective intervention. My professional development throughout the post-intervention period had continued evolving through expanding responsibilities in training development, policy consultation, and legislative advocacy that leveraged expertise gained through challenging personal experiences to benefit child protection systems throughout the region. The recognition of my capabilities had created opportunities to influence practices that would protect countless vulnerable children. Training curricula that I had developed for new Child Protective Services investigators had been adopted throughout the Oregon Department of Human Services system while receiving recognition for effectiveness in preparing professionals to handle complex cases involving family resistance, systematic discrimination. The training impact demonstrated how personal experience with challenging dynamics could enhance professional preparation when properly integrated with established evidence-based practice. Rebecca's training modules have significantly improved our new investigator preparation while providing practical knowledge about resistance strategies and intervention techniques that enhance protective outcomes. Regional Director Susan Martinez reported during the annual program evaluation. Her ability to translate complex family dynamics into actionable training content has strengthened our entire professional development system. This training impact confirmed the value of transforming personal adversity into educational resources that could benefit future professionals while contributing to improved protection for vulnerable children throughout the service region. The systematic approach to knowledge transfer had created lasting improvements in professional capabilities that would generate positive outcomes for countless families. The policy consultation role that had emerged from recognition of my expertise in complex family intervention had resulted in successful legislative advocacy that strengthened child protection statutes while ensuring appropriate due process protections that balanced child safety with family rights. The policy development work had created systemic improvements that would benefit children throughout the state. My testimony before the Oregon State Legislature had contributed to passage of enhanced compliance monitoring requirements that addressed underlying attitudes and belief systems rather than focusing exclusively on immediate behavioral modification. The legislative success demonstrated how professional expertise gained through challenging personal experiences could influence policy development that created lasting protection for vulnerable populations. Rebecca's legislative testimony provided crucial insights about effective intervention strategies that influenced our decision to strengthen compliance monitoring requirements while ensuring comprehensive educational programming for caregivers who violate child welfare standards, explained Representative Maria Gonzalez, chair of the House Committee on Human Services. Her recommendations have enhanced our state's capacity to protect vulnerable children while creating opportunities for meaningful behavioral change. This legislative impact represented one of the most significant outcomes of the entire intervention process, while demonstrating how principled advocacy could generate systemic changes that extended far beyond individual circumstances to create lasting protection for vulnerable populations throughout complex governmental and community systems. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.